My career sucks.
Sex just isn't the same.
What's my purpose?
Where did this fat come from?
My relationship is killing me.
I'll never be happy.
My debt is piling up. I'll never find love. Why can't I be like other gay guys? Hey guys, it's time to get a grip, stop whining, make a bold move, and do something amazing with your 40-plus gay life. Let's get to the show with your Tell It Like It Is host, Rick Clemons, who does his best to never act like a dick or a diva unless you act like one first.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of 40-plus Gay Men Gay Talk. And boy, do we have some ideas for you today about how to blow up your gay life. But it's coming from a guy who is an idea guy, kind of like me. I was an idea guy. I worked in ideas all my life in marketing. It's kind of interesting. I just caught in his bio like 25 years. That's kind of about the time I was in marketing as well. But us marketing guys can sometimes be little introverts and cowards when it comes to certain parts of our lives. I was, and it sounds like my guest was too, because what he couldn't admit was he was gay and that he needed to learn how to embrace who he was. And throughout his 20s and 30s, that was kind of the struggle, as many of you have struggled through that as well. And I couldn't help but just love the idea of having this wonderful guy on who has a great book, which I'll let him introduce, even though I already kind of gave a nod to it. It talks all through how he, underneath everything, was tormented, was sad, was empty, but most importantly, he really didn't like himself, which most of us have been through. So let's move to the good stuff and learn some about the stuff that was holding him back. Love to welcome to the podcast, Peter Leahy. He is the author of, and Peter, I'll let you tell everybody what that book name is, man.
Thanks, Rick. It's Glowing Up Gay, a curious journey of discovery.
Yeah, awesome.
And, I really love the setup that you had there. I appreciate you having me on and letting me talk about my story or our similar stories, so to speak.
Yeah,
I think,
awesome.
Building on that point of not liking yourself, for many years, I was embarrassed. I wanted to live a certain life. I wanted to have children. I wanted to, quote unquote, be normal. And I was embarrassed that I was attracted to big, hairy men. And I didn't want that to be true. I didn't want that life. Now, again, we live in a world now where body types and marriages and relationships can all have different definitions. At the time, the happiness that I thought I wanted in my life, I couldn't achieve it by coming out. Mm-hmm. And again, you have to realize is that I didn't have the strength inside of me. And it took me a little while. Mm-hmm. Again, multiple years. But when I finally got there, I didn't come out of the closet. I rocket boosted to Jupiter out of the closet because I was in my 40s and I was comfortable in who I was in other ways. Mm-hmm. I just needed that last part of me to really complete the circle and really become the person I was meant to be.
Don't you find it interesting, though, Peter? This is what I found. Like you, I was comfortable in lots of other spaces in my world. I mean, I was comfortable being in my career and being a leader and being like creative and artistic, which probably, if we want to do the stereotypes, well, then why weren't you accepting yourself as being gay if you're creative and artistic? I hate the stereotypes. But what I found interesting for me is once I realized that unique space of, well, gay is just another expression of who I am. Why didn't I tap into all these other areas where I was comfortable being me and use that to help catapult me forward? Which what I ended up discovering, Peter, was that actually was part of why I was finally able to do it. I'm like, I did it, came out. But when I think about it now, if I, look in, rearview mirror, 2020, rearview mirror sort of stuff, it really was the confidence, the comfortableness in other areas of my life that finally helped build the strength to come out later in life. I'm curious if you see some of that in your own world.
Definitely. And I think I'm going to build on your parable and say, I had my work life and I had my personal life. Mm-hmm. And they were different sides of me. And they were different rules, so to speak. One, again, very confident, one ashamed, one very accomplished, one struggling financially in other different ways. And I was the same person in both. And once I melded that personality into both of those worlds. I thought it'd be so much different, that I'd be different at work, that I would with my friends, that I would with my family. No, I was one person. And once I stopped with the different stories, the different lies, the different truths in all different environments, it was amazing how much more relaxed, comfortable, and happy, and again, lighter I was in general. And in fact, I had a little metamorphosis. I don't know. So one of the things, I used to suffer from male pattern baldness. Oh, so insecure about my hair, or my lack of hair.
Yep.
I kind of have the horseshoe design going on. I shaved my head the night before I came out of the closet.
Wow.
And it was like that, like getting rid of that snake skin and really just saying, okay, this is who I am. I'm not going to be embarrassed by who I am. And again, I wasn't 100% confident at first, but it definitely was sort of a new me look about coming out and, literally shaving away my insecurities and saying, this is really who I am.
Yeah. Yeah. I recently heard Jane Fonda make a statement of, and it was on a podcast. It may have been on Oprah's podcast. I don't know. It was just recently, and it's probably, if it's Oprah, it's an old podcast. But when she said, "I no longer am in pursuit of perfection. I'm in pursuit of being whole." And I thought, that is such a great metamorphosis statement for those of us who come out. We're just in pursuit of being whole, wholly who we are, right? Not whole, guys. Let's keep it clean here today on the show. But it's one of those things, right? And I realized when I heard that, I'm like, yeah, every step of the way, now that I'm older and wiser and all that sort of stuff, I do realize, even at 62 years old, I'm just continuing to want to be whole in whatever ways that looks like for me. And I think for many of us as gay men, especially those of us who come out later in life, it's almost like, okay, I want this, but what we really want is just to acknowledge, okay, this is me. This is just 100% me. And like you said some very similar things to what I would have said. I just started being me in every other space in my world, because it wasn't, I'm this at work and this at home, and I think it's really difficult when we try to play both sides of that fence.
Yeah. And what's great about using the word whole is also, whole is the opposite of empty. If you think of it in terms of not pursuing the person that you are, the person you want to love, the way that you want to express yourself, you're empty or missing things in some way. When you're finally your true self, your whole self, you're just living day to day, and whatever comes at you is authentic, and you get to experience that now as a complete man, not as a portion or form of you.
What is something you've learned about yourself in that wholeness?
I think in my process of coming out, I was very deliberate. I would take people aside at my work. I'd go into a conference room. They knew I was divorced. They probably knew I was gay anyway, but I'd take them into a room. I'd be very private and say, guess what? I'm really gay. And I was deliberate. Like, I would tell you and I wouldn't tell you. And then finally someone metaphorically went, smack. They hit me upside the face and said, Peter, stop being who you are. Stop trying to explain yourself. Just live your life. People will catch up. And more importantly, the people that want to know you or want to be in your life, they will do that. If they don't want it, they've already made the decision whether they're part of your future. So I would say that the freedom of being authentically me and living my day-to-day life through work, through passions, I play sports. Of course, I play pickleball. I live in California.
Of course.
But meeting friends that way, that is the way to live, and to not chase other people, not to beg them to come along with you. I think I was always looking for that acceptance from other people when I wasn't my true self. Now that I find my tribe and it grows, and sometimes it ebbs and flows, I think that's one of my biggest learnings.
I love that. And I think it's something that each of us learns in different stages. When I first came out at 19, I was like, it was, right at the beginning of the AIDS epidemic, all that stuff. There was so much confusion, and I ended up being really scared. I'm not going to go into that detail because the guys have heard that story numerous times. But then through the time that I floated along, married, kids, all that stuff, I wasn't whole. I put on a good front. Everybody believed I was that guy. And then, as painful as it was when I did come out, I saw myself probably clearer than I ever had. I didn't love what I was doing for my work. I still did it for a few years. I really didn't enjoy some of the things that I was doing in my couplehood with my ex-wife, as like, oh, let's do this or go here or be this. Wasn't my jam. None of that. And I felt betrayal, like, okay, but if I walk away from this, who am I hurting? Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Obviously, I was hurting my ex-wife by walking away, but I wasn't talking just about that. Like, if I say I really don't like going out and doing this kind of, oh, let's be seen and go have cocktails at, the LA bar, I didn't really enjoy that. But who might I offend by that? And some of the greatest learnings was I get to be me. And if it offends somebody, that's on them. That's not on me. Which at first I was like kind of the flippant gay, like, well, whatever. If you don't, and I'm like, oh, that's not me either. And I found a way to start to balance all of it out. Like, hey, that's not my thing. It is for you. So please go enjoy it. I just won't be joining you. Did I lose some friends? Of course I did. Okay. But I also learned, you know what? The friends you lose make room for the friends you're supposed to have.
I love that.
And it was such a big difference. And I think part of what we start to see in ourselves as we go through these journeys, and I say this to gay men in midlife all the time, you're not done coming out, buddy. There's all sorts of new coming out journeys coming that you don't even see coming down the pike yet. Like, sex and all that sort of stuff. You may get to a point like, I just don't want to fuck like rabbits anymore. But I sure love intimacy and cuddling and, whatever else. But some guys are so freaked out by that. Like, wait, but this is who I'm supposed to be as a gay man. I'm like, really? Let me find the handbook. I don't think it's in there, but it's also interesting. So what inspired you to, like, 2.5 years ago, the book came out. What was the inspiration behind your book?
A coworker, I have stories. Again, I was married to a woman, my ex-wife, for 20 years. We had lots of trials and tribulations. My child was sick when he was younger. He's made some incredible progress. And she said, well, you should write a blog. I said, blog? Who's going to read my blog? Who's going to care?
Right.
And it was during the pandemic, and I just took it upon myself to say, could I write a book? Could I write a memoir about my coming out journey and use it as a platform that could inspire other people to also think about not settling, finding your true self, just being happy in general, being happy with yourself, and then being happy in general. So I made a goal, and again, I wasn't writer. I still feel like I have a little bit of imposter syndrome. I don't feel like I'm an author, but I wrote a book.
Mm-hmm.
But in this case, I wrote an outline. I had 20 bullet points, and I said each of those is a story. I'm going to turn it into a chapter each, and then I'm going to determine the common thread or the way that I can build themes. And it's my story, so it's not necessarily, obviously, not yours or anyone. Because I grew up in Boston originally, there's a chapter on the Red Sox. There's a chapter on the New England Patriots. But if you know anybody from Boston, the Red Sox finally winning is a touchstone moment.
Yep.
So those type of events and family of origin issues. I mean, that's the discovery that I made about my family and my relationship with my parents, for instance, was the biggest thing that I took out of this. And again, we talked earlier about things you always knew or feel comfortable that you didn't know.
Right.
I was very comfortable in talking about my relationship with my father, and it was complicated. And I, saw my mother as a saint. And then when I started typing, I'm like, wow, maybe my mother wasn't this saint or isn't up for a saint. I mean, she is.
Yes.
She had triplets. Another part of the story.
Okay.
But it is amazing how the process of documenting my own story allowed me, by the way, Chihuahua in my lap. Hello. That's Zoe Elizabeth Taylor. You never guess she has two fathers.
She's the queen of the household out here.
She is the queen of the household. The process of reviewing my own family of origin issues allowed me to understand the decisions that I made in the time and the sort of my triggers as I think about myself pursuing passions, relationship, friends, things like that.
I'm so glad you touched on that, because this is one of the things that I think many of us as gay men, once we release ourselves into accepting our coming out, okay, here we are, right? I don't think we're ever prepared for the triggers of what we had been living that trigger us in our current gay relationships. Whether it be, oh, I'm acting like my mother or my father, or wow, I didn't see that I was going to end up with, we all have somebody we end up with at some point in time for a bit that's like, that was the biggest nightmare. What caused me? Well, it was because there's some trigger that says, "Ooh, here, do this. This might be really good for you." And I don't know, those triggers are just, even at 62 years old, there are times that like something will hit me. I'm like, whoa, where did that come from? Right. Well, it came from clear back when we were experiencing those things.
I think, I'm going to build on what you just said about triggers and relationships. You could easily say, I was married to a woman the first part of my life. Now I'm married to a man, and everything's great.
Yep. Yep.
But you don't realize that you are a person that has triggers, that has a type, has things that you're successful, maybe not so successful.
Right.
It's not going to just magically change for the better because you found someone who's the same sex as you. You got to work on yourself or figure out what went wrong in your previous relationship or what you brought or didn't bring to the relationship.
Yep.
And make sure you course correct second time around.
But too often we don't. That's the thing. I mean, so again, this is not new news to anybody who's listened to any of my podcasts. So between the two that I've been doing, I was never faithful in my relationship with my wife. I mean, I was exploring with men all the time. Not something I'm proud of, but we got through it, got me where I was going, all that sort of stuff. But what I find really interesting is when I think through that piece, it is also one of the things that helped me open my mind to not being judgmental about other people in our community, which is the trigger button that I'm about to bring up. So let's wait for the explosion. It's going to happen. People who are in open relationships. Because I was super misjudgy. I was queen of judgy, like your chihuahua. I was super queen of judgy about people in open relationships. I'm like, Rick, who the fuck do you think you are? You were in a freaking open relationship for 13 years of your marriage. Your wife just didn't know it, right? And it's so interesting when these worlds come together and you have those epiphanies. So you can see clearly, like, this is my stuff. It's nobody else's. Well, nobody else's, so to speak. And to me, Peter, this is when, at least for me and many guys that I've talked to, those are the growth moments. That's when suddenly it's like everything just happened on steroids all of a sudden, right? Like, wow, I never saw that coming. And I will never say I love the triggers, but I also will say how much I appreciate the triggers that open me up to rethinking how I see the world. As you were writing the book, did you have those epiphany moments? I'm sure you must have.
I think I did in terms of, so I always thought my story and my inspirational journey was both a happy ending, but also a warning. Like, I want you to learn from me, but I also don't want you to do what I did.
Yep.
I think the part of sort of being not the writing, but the writer, when you finally can help people, when you can finally get people, going to where they should be on a quicker path, when you can help people, when you can touch people, that's the greatest gift that I never knew that I could give. And a funny thing that when I finally published the book, I thought gay dads and maybe a couple people in the bear community would be the ones who would read it. Who else would want to learn about my stories? Actually, straight coworkers and people in my industry that are friends, I have become their gay whisperer. And that was a completely unrelated thing because I was so out there with who I was and my struggles. And again, I think that's one of the greatest things about telling your story to people in this case, because I never told you, I wrote the book. It took me 5 or 6 months. I sat on it for a year. I didn't publish it right away because I was so scared. And again, I was scared this time that, oh, I'm going to tell people that I had a bankruptcy, that my child was sick when I was younger, that I was such a failure, that I felt like a coward for most of my, adult life.
Right.
And then I finally needed a date. In this case, it was a get together with some people. And I said, you know what? I'm going to do it. I'm going to press the button on Amazon on this Monday. And I'm finally getting it. And I didn't change a thing. I just needed to come to terms with finally getting it out the door.
Mhm.
And knowing that people, again, appreciate the story. They like the writing. Who's not to love when people say nice things about your writing? They seem
Right.
to like the authenticity of it, but it's also very raw that way. So both the writing and being helping people, those are two of the greatest gifts I receive on a monthly
Mhm.
basis.
And I feel like sometimes, you know, that giving and touching and just, being there for somebody else. Okay. I think that's why most authors write books. I mean, I've interviewed some really well-known authors. Christopher Rice was on the show not long ago, Anne Rice's son, and we've talked about, he went from kind of fiction with his mom to now he's gay romantic fiction all the way, right?
Mhm.
And he goes, I'm not really doing it for myself. He goes, I'm doing it for the pleasure of writing, but the people who want to hear it. In fact, I just met another guy who's going to be on the podcast coming down the road, another gay romantic author. And one of the questions I asked him while we were like talking about possibly having it on the show was, why does this matter? Why do we need romance novels, period, in this world right now? We've got, reality TV that can throw it at us. We got movies that can throw it at us. And I loved his response. He said, you have to have something for everybody. And I feel like what I'm putting out there is for somebody. That's all he cares. He doesn't really care if he makes a ton of money. I mean, guys listening, there's no money, quote unquote, in books. Just going to tell you the real
Big,
truth. I mean,
big
unless even
funding.
even big names,
Yeah.
they're not making bank on this. It's what you get because of the book that's where there's money, so to speak. But
Well, and think of it as not, I don't know if I want to say philosophically, it's why you were put on this earth, but at least from a vocation perspective,
mhm,
you produce something that people find of value. Think of the intrinsic value that comes inside of you by getting that validation.
mhm. Well, and I can relate to you. I've got a book sitting over here on my shelf that I wrote. It literally started right as the pandemic started. I sat on it for a couple of years putting it together. Finally, one year, I'm like, let's get it done. I got it done. Last year, I shopped it, trying to get a agent. Couldn't get anywhere with it. Got some really good feedback from a friend of mine who is an agent. And it's been sitting there ever since. I'm like, okay, I'm not motivated to do it, you know? Now my husband's going to be gone for a few days. In a few days, I'm like, okay, well, let's spend it. Let's spend some time going through this, right? There's
Oh my
always some
gosh.
reason I'm not getting it done, right? And it wasn't
Uh,
because I couldn't get an agent. That didn't bug me at all. I knew it was very rough and it was going to take some like we got to really polish this if I'm going to get somebody to pick it up. But I'm also realizing that why am I doing this? It's just for me. I wanted to have some impact out there, but I enjoy writing. I could sit down and write and really enjoy it. And I think that's the thing that I also wanted to like bring up by interviewing you is some people are like, well, there's lots of other books about gay men who come out later in life. I'm like, yeah, but they're never going to tell it the way Peter tells his story. They're never going to tell it the way I told my story. There'll be crossovers of what we both learned, but there's going to be these unique pieces of what gets revealed. That to me is what's the important part of all of this. So in the people who have read, I love that you have your gay whisperer thing because it was funny
oh yeah.
when Frankly My Dear when Frankly My Dear came out, it was really interesting. My straight friends who read it were like, when are you going to write the one for us? When are you going to write the one for us? Right? I'm like, well, you read this. Can't you just kind of pull from the metaphors and everything and figure it out?
Exactly.
And that's what the book sitting on the shelf it was for, is for everybody else. And the feedback I got was, why didn't you just write this for gay men? Because there's so much good stuff that gay men can benefit from. This should be just a gay men's book. I'm like, okay, well, let's go back to what we know. I'm curious, as the quote straights of the world started reading this, what are some of the things that they really picked up, Mr. Gay Whisperer? What was something they picked up from your story that really helped them?
So what I'm going to answer that question second, but I'm going to provide a slightly different answer first. one of the things that most of my friends told me was, I had no idea. Why did you suffer for so long? Why didn't you come out to me? Why didn't you trust me?
Mm-hmm.
And it took me a while to formulate a correct response. And it wasn't about them. They weren't untrustworthy. They weren't a safe person. They were a great friend. I just wasn't ready. And I think that's one of the things that when you write about pain and about emotion, and people that consider you, trustworthy or close, and they said you couldn't do it. I said, no, I just wasn't ready.
Mm-hmm.
But I also want to answer your question about one of the things that I've learned from people that provide me feedback, in that I guess what they feel is they they say the word brave, but it's a little bit of a
Mm-hmm.
double-edged sword.
Yep.
Like, I can't believe you shared so much bleeping detail about all the problems and disappointments and things that went wrong in your life. And that's just what my writing style was, or that's what
Right.
I put together, because I needed to, like a roller coaster, I needed to go all the way into the depths of the problems, of the mistakes, of the regrets, of the pain, of the disappointment before I could get up that roller coaster and take the reader into, hey, I opened the door like Dorothy in Wizard of Oz. I went from black and white to
Mm-hmm.
color, and look what I'm doing now, or look how I'm feeling now. Look at the things that have happened to my life. My life was so I made my life so difficult when I was in the closet. And again, I people got hurt as a result of me coming out, but I was in the wrong environment, and my life suffered because of that. And when I finally came out, finding the right people, moving to the right place,
Mm-hmm.
putting people in my life that enhanced me, and I enhanced them. That's what, and for me, again, it's only been 12 years since I've come out.
Mm-hmm.
11 years since I was divorced my ex-wife. So it's still a process of learning and growing.
Absolutely. But you said it so eloquently, like the color that's now been brought into your life. And I'm not going to go all rainbows and unicorns, but there's a color that comes into our life when we start living our truest self. We come out of those shadows, no pun intended, but we really do. We come out of the shadows, remove the mask, whatever metaphor you want to use, and step into more of our own brilliance. Doesn't mean it's easy. And a lot of guys listening are like, yeah, I've heard this all before. It's never going to be easy. Well, it isn't going to be easy, but it's going to be a lot easier than what was. I would, at this stage of my life, 13 years married, came out, went through the divorce. That was rough. Kids growing up, now got grown kids, grandbaby maybe on the way in the next year or so. I can't imagine going through that in the darkness that I was in. I'm not even
So
sure that I would even be here, not because of suicide, but I wonder if the stress of it all would have finally just said, done. We're going to take your little ticker and turn it off, Rick.
the one of the decisions that helped me come out and helped me divorce my ex-wife, again at the time, we were in an unhappy relationship. I was afraid to come out. There's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
problems there.
Yep. Yep.
And my children were 13 and 10 at the time. And one of the things that helped me make that decision to walk out the door is, would I want my kids to go through this? And I wouldn't want them to settle or be unhappy as I was, or the fake that we were doing. And that helped me say, if I'm going to teach them anything, I'm going to teach them to stand up for yourself, be a successful and happy person, because I don't want you to do all the suffering that I'd already done. Staying together for the kids is one of the worst decisions, I believe, in my opinion, that people can do, because you're just modeling bad behavior or modeling settling.
Yep.
And then, you don't want to, you want to break the cycle of that.
And it is the cycle. It is such a cycle. And one of my greatest regrets, again, I'm not going to go deep into it because I've talked about it before, but one of my greatest regrets is that our youngest daughter never remembers mom and dad ever living together. She was 18 months old when we separated. However, the power of what became her life carried her through some of her roughest times in life, too. And to see her being who she is now, and I'm not bragging here, but I think it's the power of being around and raised by two gay men who are like, you get to be who you want to be, plain and simple. May not be everybody's cup of tea, may not be sometimes the best thing for you, but you get to be who you are. And the one thing I will proudly say as a father of two amazing young women is I do feel like we contributed to them being amazing young women, because they don't stand for anybody's shit. They don't. Now, that doesn't mean they're assholes either, but they literally stand in their power, being who they are, even with me sometimes. There's times I'm like, I'm being dad, and they'll do the stand up. And I'm like, okay, I'm really glad you stood up to me about that, because then we have a better relationship. We see things better. Too often people go, oh, but look at what you did. You broke the, and I thought that too, man. I thought,
Oh,
my
of
God,
course.
I'm going to screw them up so much. You know, that's all I heard from certain members of the family. You're going to ruin their lives, da, da, da. And I have to say that none of that has come true yet. We had rough
That was,
times, of course, but
admittedly, that was my ex-wife's trigger words with me. Haven't you done enough?
yeah.
When anything bad came out after we were separated, divorced, all that type of thing. Haven't you done enough? And that was always the excuse to try to control me or try to put her will over mine on the children.
So I'm going to just bring this up because I haven't even thought about this until you just used that phrase. When we were going through the separation and everything, we had a therapist, and we worked together a while. And then my ex said, I just don't want to work with her anymore. Then she got pissed off because I did. She's like, well, I found her. Why should you get to take my therapist? I'm like, you're walking away. You say you don't want to. I love working with the guy, right? So we were in a session once and that whole thing was happening. Well, haven't you done enough? And I remember the therapist turning to me and saying, Rick, how would you like to address that? And I said, yes, I think I've done enough, but have you? Because at that point, I was already getting in the mindset of wanting to be a coach, considering becoming a therapist myself. And I thought, I'm not going to say this out of, I mean, it just came out of my mouth, but I thought, oftentimes the person who is going through this, seeing themselves as the wounded, they have not done enough. They have not started to do enough to heal themselves and rise above. I will take full responsibility. I always have taken full responsibility for what I contributed to a point. And it was probably around that point when I said that yes, I have done enough and I continue to do enough to rise above this. But have you done enough? Because you can only take so much responsibility before somebody else has to own their stuff. And for any of you guys listening, I'm so glad that Peter brought this up, because some of you are struggling in your relationships, intimate, loving relationships, family relationships. But I'm going to challenge you, especially going into this new year, that if this has been a recurring theme for you and you continue and continue and continue to struggle with this, I'm going to ask you to ask yourself, have you done enough? Because if you're struggling, you haven't done enough. You have not done enough work on yourself. You have not done enough. And I'm not saying I'm a guru. I don't think Peter's saying he is either. We're operating truly from a space of, you know, when you're doing the work and you're doing enough, because things begin to change. Everything begins to change.
To your point, I had 3 therapists over 3 years when I first came out because I was just a mess. I didn't know who I was, didn't know what I wanted, wasn't comfortable, much less loving myself. And again, that was a process that I had to take. One of the things about the process of writing, if I could throw this in, my favorite thing I've ever written is actually not in the book, because I did it about a year ago. I wrote a letter to my past self, the version of me that is still in the closet, that is still afraid, that's still not sure of what's going to happen in life. And I'm like, dude, you're never going to believe what happened. And I loved how, and I think most of us who go through later in life, the old life is bad, the new life is good, or the old life was wrong, the new life is great. And
right.
It's never anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things that I regret in my book and how I looked at myself for a long time was that Peter was weak and this Peter is strong.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me a while to sort of, again, get that into my head saying, you know what? I'm not here today talking to you, happily married and successful as an author, unless that guy is strong.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a love letter / thank you letter for him, Peter, from December 2012,
Yep.
saying, thank you for giving me the life that I have now.
Yep.
And I think for many of your listeners, it's probably a reminder that's saying the strong person that you want to be or that you think you might get to someday, you might be that person already. You just don't know it.
No, we don't ever know it until we have that moment. You know, that's one of my favorite exercises as a coach, is to either have somebody write a letter to their past self or write a letter from that past self looking to what they see now and go, hey, Rick, wow, have you changed? You know, or wow, what happened to you? Like that. Sometimes we use it as an anger management tool. Like, hey,
Mm-hmm.
go get angry with yourself. Let's go. But
And to
do it
your
in a
point,
way that's very controlled.
yeah, the anger part is for people that have settled in a relationship. If you the young idealized, with full hair person, sees where you are now and saying, this is where your life is? Is this really what you wanted? Is this really who you are?
Right.
Maybe again, whether it's reevaluating or getting back to you, I often felt like I became the 19 to 22-year-old version of myself, the carefree one, the confident, the happy-go-lucky person of me. I just got off on a wrong turn for a couple of years. And again, I wanted to have children. I'm very happy that I did. And I wanted to be married. And I loved many of those experiences. But I slowly began to hate myself at the same time.
Yep.
And getting back to full circle of loving myself and being that complete person, whole, as you said earlier, that's where the journey has taken me.
Well, I love to hear that, Peter. So if somebody wants to get your book, where can they get it?
It's exclusively on Amazon right now, both
Okay.
print and digital.
Nice.
Glowing Up Gay, A Curious Journey of Discovery. And I think from a validation perspective, it's got 5 stars right now.
Oh,
I have
awesome.
148 5-star reviews.
That's awesome.
And I put that as a testament that what I've written seems to resonate with some people. I'm a marketing guy by day, as we talked about with ideas. This isn't my vocation, at least not anytime soon, but the idea that at a man who's over 50 and I was able to do something new, I was able to try something and it seems to have worked. It's like I've grown a third arm or something like that. Like I've accomplished something I never thought I would in my life.
Yeah.
When I was younger, I never wrote more than 5 pages. And the idea that I could tell a story and that people would relate to it, it's funny, it's sad, and people seem to enjoy it. And my friends are proud of me. All of that feels really wonderful.
Well, that's awesome. Well, I encourage anybody who's looking for something, if you're looking for something to start your new year, to set yourself on the right path, on the tone, sometimes you just got to hear it from somebody else's perspective. And then you're like, oh, wow, that's exactly what I needed too. So appreciate you, man. Thank you for being part of my world. Thank you for helping me kick the new year off. I mean, it's hard to believe it's 2026. I'm like, what happened? Where did 2025 go? Not that I want to live most of 2025. We'll just leave it at that. But
exactly.
It's a very interesting to see where we continue to go as we let ourselves glow up, as you would say, because it's constantly a glow up each and every day.
And we expand our friendships by allowing ourselves to be open to meeting people, shared experiences, things like that.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Thank you all for tuning in. We'll be right back in another week. These weeks fly by quickly with another guest giving you some good stuff to help you navigate your 40+ gay life. Have a good week, everyone. And thanks for being listeners.
That's a wrap for 40+. Gay men, gay talk, where size doesn't matter. We drop our bullshit, get over our screwed up fears, make bold moves, and live life without apologies. Don't forget to join us on Facebook at 40+, Gay Men, Gay Talk, where the conversations continue.